We are prone to making excuses. And so he talks about that in chapter 22 and verse 13. The lazy man says, "There is a lion outside. I shall be slain in the streets." When you're lazy, you can legit come up with an excuse for everything. People don't normally fall because of a big event. They fall because of a bunch of little things. And laziness is one of those things where if I'm not aware of it and I'm not facing it and I'm not dealing with it and I'm not confronting it, then it can really creep up on me. And then once you kind of develop this habit of laziness, man, it's hard to break that. It's hard to do things the right way. So please understand that in the context of the sermon tonight. But there is a ton of Proverbs that deal with this issue of laziness. So kind of broken it into two categories. You know, there is a comedian, Jeff Foxworthy, who has a thing, "You might be a redneck if," okay? You guys know him? Or okay, good. So it's like we're all trying to be too spiritual. I never heard of the man. So I kind of took a spin off of that and say, you might be lazy if, and I've listed 6 things based on the Proverbs. So you might be lazy if, 1, you have trouble starting your work. If you have trouble starting your work. All right, so let's look at a couple of verses. Hope you guys will pull your Bibles out tonight. Proverbs 24. This is a very famous passage in Proverbs 24. Well, they're all famous, but we have where it talks about, not in Proverbs 4, but not in Proverbs 24, but where it talks about, "Go to the ant, you sluggard, and consider her ways and how she prepares for winter." And this is the picture of a person that's not lazy, the picture of a person that works hard. But then he says, then we have the contrast here in verse 30, Proverbs 20 and verse 30. "I went by the field of a lazy man, and by the vineyard of a man devoid of understanding." So there are certain characteristics that stick out about this guy that's lazy. And he says, "And there it was, all overgrown with thorns. Its surface was covered with nettles. Its stone wall was broken down. When I saw it, I considered it well. I looked on it and received instruction. A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest. So shall your poverty come like a prowler, and your need like an armed man." If you have done or dealt with kind of little projects like this, you know that if you just deal with stuff early and simply, like if you deal with stuff when it's in infant stages, what did Barney Fife say? You got to nip it in the bud, right? You have to deal with stuff in its infant stages. If you let stuff go, then it becomes overwhelming. And this is a lazy person. A lazy person gets up and they know that they need to deal with some stuff, and they just like, it's the lazy person has a hard time getting going. So they know that they need to do something, but they just kind of waste time. And this is where I think, for example, like technology, our phones would be an example of this, where it's just, they're so awesome. And I love technology, okay? So I'm not down on it in any way. But looking at your phone can keep you from doing stuff that you really need to do. And it's just easier to kind of look at your phone than do the big things. And so what we'll do is we'll just kind of, we'll get on, we'll wake up and we'll check Facebook. Like I'll do this when I come into my office, The most important thing I do is sermon prep, by far the most important thing I do. And that's kind of can be hard work. So you come in and you want to start grinding through the scriptures, but I'll check some email and I'll straighten my desk and just kind of it's easy to just procrastinate and put off doing the big things. And that oftentimes is a sign of my own laziness. I just have kind of trouble getting going. And that's the problem with the lazy man. There were little things that need to be dealt with, but he just kept putting it off and putting it off. And then the next thing you know, it's this huge problem. And that's really what he's talking about there. It's easy to do the fun things in life. The things that we enjoy. There are things that I do that I enjoy doing, and I look forward to doing them. They're easy tasks. And sometimes, though, the most important task can be the hardest task, and oftentimes when we're lazy, we'll put those hard tasks off. And so you might be lazy if you have trouble starting your work. Proverbs 14:23, that's another one that kind of deals with this particular thing. It says, in all labor there is profit, but idle chatter leads to poverty. So have you ever been talking to somebody like Karen and I we'll get up in the morning and we'll go in the living room and she'll get her coffee and I'll drink my water, I guess. And we'll kind of be chatting, and then we'll finally say, and then we'll talk about all that we need to do for the day. And then one of us will say, well, maybe we should get started now. Because it's the easiest thing in the world to sit around and talk about all we need to do. And we can all sit around and talk about, well, this needs to be done and that needs to be done. But laziness keeps me from actually doing it. Alexander MacLaren, a 19th century Scottish preacher, says this about procrastination. No unwelcome task becomes any the less unwelcoming by putting them off till tomorrow. It is only when they are behind us and done that we begin to find that there is a sweetness to be tasted afterward, and that the remembrance of unwelcome duties unhesitantly done is welcome and pleasant. Basically, where you really find joy is not putting it off, but doing it, and then the joy comes in the finished task. I did what I was supposed to do. Okay, so you might be, according to Proverbs, you might be lazy if you have trouble starting your work. 2, you might be lazy if you have trouble finishing your work. You might have trouble finishing your work. Okay, so sometimes our laziness shows up in the opposite of, we're eager to get it going, we kind of drag our feet finishing it. Can I just tell you something about in my running days, which seems like it's eternity ago. It's easy to start a race, it's hard to finish one. I'm telling you, the first half marathon I did, the last 0.1 miles seemed like an eternity. It's like, is that finish line anywhere remotely close? It's just hard to finish. And that's just kind of how it is in life. And oftentimes we're excited and we start a project, but then, man, the low blood sugar comes and it gets difficult and hard, and we just I'll finish it tomorrow. Proverbs talks about that, for example, in Proverbs 12:27. A lazy man does not roast what he took in hunting, but diligence is man's precious possession. I don't hunt, and I don't hunt because I have anything against hunting. I don't own a gun. I'm just not. I didn't grow up hunting and shooting guns and stuff. I'm not anti-gun, and if you want to own one, God bless you. Please protect me if something bad happens. Okay? So I'm not. But I got to tell you, man. Maybe the reason why I've never hunted is because I don't want to shoot something that then I got to clean up. I mean, that's, if I can be totally honest. I didn't grow up on a farm. I'm kind of a city kid. So some guy years ago wanted to take me out hunting, and I'm like, well, if I shoot it, do I have to clean it? And he's like, yep. I'm like, I'm out. And yet, but you guys that's kind of the hard work, right? I mean, in some level, the easy part is, and I know my man card just went down about 10, but I'm sorry. I'm just being honest. But the easy part in a lot of ways is shooting the animal. The hard part is cleaning it. The easy part is casting the wire. What goes into the water? Yeah, whatever goes into the water. That's the easy part. The hard part is once you get it in, cleaning it. Boy, this is... Okay. Let's read a couple other verses. How about Proverbs 19:24? You guys love Sunday nights, don't you? Because it's just, I'm drained from Sunday morning, and we're just we're limping to the finish line. Anyway, so, all right, verse 24. A lazy man buries his hand in the bowl and will not so much as bring it to his mouth again. Have you ever, the kids did this occasionally. They would they would get so tired that they're sitting at the table. This is years ago when the kids were little. And they were so tired, and they'd have their hand on their food, and they'd fall asleep on the table. That's the picture here. A lazy guy gets his hand on the food but doesn't bring it to his mouth. He can't finish the job, in a sense. Proverbs 26, verse 15. The lazy man buries his hand in the bowl. It wearies him to bring it back to his mouth. That's the whole man, I don't want to get up and go in the kitchen because I'm going to have to walk in there and then walk back out here. That's lazy. And when you don't have kids around to do that for you anymore, your laziness gets exposed. So then you're like, this is real lazy of me, Karen, but can you go get me something out of the refrigerator? Anyway, so that's just proof that I have a laziness issue. So you have trouble finishing your work, okay? This is a rough one for me. Number 3, how do you know? Proverbs says you might be lazy if you have trouble starting your work or you have trouble finishing your work. Or 3, if you are undisciplined in your sleep. If you're undisciplined in your sleep. Sleep is spiritual. Sleep is spiritual. It's very, very important to our spiritual life. One of the prophets in the Old Testament, Elijah. Remember when Elijah was really depressed after the issue at Mount Carmel and with the prophets of Baal, and he had that great victory, and then Jezebel said, "I'm going to kill you," and he got really scared and really discouraged. And it's always been interesting to me how God dealt with him. He didn't bring somebody to him and go, "Come on, Elijah, get with it." What he did is he took him to this cave and he told him to sleep and rest. And you know what else he did? He brought him food. He had ravens bring him food. And we sometimes in this I'm talking in church work. I'm talking about guys that have done it that are in church work. I grew up around a lot of guys that they just thought you should work all the time, and they didn't value rest. There is a reason why that in the 7 days of creation that God took a day to rest. Did God take a day to rest because he's exhausted? Or did God take a day of rest because he is teaching us what we need to do in our lives? Okay, the answer is B. Okay, he's not exhausted, like, oh man, this creation wore me out. The point is he's teaching us that we need rest. Rest is spiritual. So there's 2 things that we can do wrong with sleep. We can do it too much, and that's what he talks about in chapter 6 when he talks about the ant. Go to the ant, you sluggard, verse 6, consider her ways, which having no captain, overseer, ruler, provides her supplies in the summer and gathers her food in the harvest. How long will you slumber, O sluggard? When will you rise up from your sleep? A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to sleep. So shall your poverty come on you like a prowler and your need like an armed man. So the problem with the sluggard is he just won't get out of bed. He values sleep too much, and he's not disciplined in it. Okay? Now, there's a lot of this in the Bible, in Proverbs. Look at Proverbs 19 and verse 15. Proverbs 19, verse 15. Laziness casts one into a deep sleep, and an idle person will suffer hunger. Proverbs 20 and verse 13. Do not love sleep, lest you come to poverty. Open your eyes, and you will be satisfied with bread. This is how a lot of people, for example, deal with stress. They just go to sleep. They sleep. And what he's saying is, don't love sleep. Sleep is important, but don't fall in love with it. Be disciplined in your sleep. And listen to your body. We all have different body types. We all deal different. Some need, like my wife needs a lot more sleep than I need. And Karen values her sleep, and I have struggled in that for the purpose of just schedules that I've had in my life, and so I'm trying to do this. I'm trying to live this, but it can be difficult. Whereas, my wife and I may struggle with different things in the sense that I don't value sleep as much as I should, which then if I don't get the proper sleep I should, then I'm totally useless during the day. But then if I sleep too much, then I'm missing opportunities to do more for Christ or be a blessing to others or help others. So that's what he's talking about here when he's saying don't love sleep, be disciplined in it, but you can go one of two ways. You can love it too much and never get out of bed, or you can not find the importance of it and get sleep, be disciplined and go to sleep when you need to go to sleep. So that's often a sign of unlaziness as we are disciplined in our sleep. Because it matters. Avoid oversleeping, but also make sure you discipline your body to get a decent amount of sleep so that you don't waste the day. Number 4, the fourth thing that he says in Proverbs that says that we might be lazy is if we are prone to making excuses. We are prone to making excuses. And so he talks about that in chapter 22 and verse 13. The lazy man says, there is a lion outside. I shall be slain in the streets. Okay, now what's he saying? When you're lazy, you can legit come up with an excuse for everything. Everything. Okay? And oftentimes, like I've said, the things that we need to do, the things that are important to do, we don't do, and we make excuses why we can't do them. You can come up with 100 reasons why you today, I'm sure, could have come up with 100 reasons why you couldn't come back tonight. Well, there's a cold front. There's a cold front coming in. It may snow on us by the time we're in church, and I don't drive well in the snow. I don't like being cold. You get what I'm saying? I mean, we can come up with excuses for everything. And oftentimes the fact that we can come up with all these excuses is a sign that we're lazy. And that's what he's saying here. The lazy man says, there's a lion. Well, look, there's no lion walking around the streets. But rumor is. And it's okay to do hard stuff. And I think actually it's not okay. I think it's healthy for us. You should always be doing something that pushes you just a little bit. Because when we just do what's always comfortable to us, we don't get pushed outside of our comfort zones, and we don't grow. The guy at the gym that has huge arms didn't get it by just taking supplements. He had to kind of put himself in a position where he's lifting something that's difficult for him to lift. The easiest thing to do in life is always do what's comfortable to us. And so when you do that, you can always come up with reasons why I can't do it. And it's just laziness on our part. Number 5, how does Proverbs say we might be lazy? If we are restless with unsatisfied desires. We are restless with unsatisfied desires. Proverbs 13 and verse 4 says, the soul of the lazy man desires and has nothing, but the soul of the diligent shall be made rich. There's a lot of people who are frustrated with where they're at, but will not do anything about it. Like, I don't like where my marriage is, or I don't like where I'm at personally. But it's just desire, and they don't make any changes. They're too lazy to make any changes. And we're just kind of these restless individuals that are constantly unsatisfied with our lives, but don't want to do the hard work to make the changes necessary to get where we have some peace. A guy said this, the appetite keeps normal people alive by driving them to work to satisfy it. But it kills the sluggard because his hands refuse to satisfy it. So the hardworking guy his appetite is driven by he has this desire to work and do a good job, and he works hard to satisfy it. The sluggard says, man, I want to have a life of significance. I just don't want to do any work for it. And this is kind of our culture a little bit, where it's like, I want to have a lot of money, so I'll just play the lottery. Right? I don't want to save or be smart with my money or do any of that. I just want to play the lottery. We're looking for the easy fix. And so he goes on to say, Bruce Waltke is his name. He said, the appetite keeps normal people alive by driving them to work to satisfy it, but it kills the sluggard because his hands refuse to satisfy it. His unfulfilled craving kills him both by starvation and frustration. So in other words, I'm hungry and I want to eat and I need to get out there and do something to get some food, but I don't want to. And that's often a sign of laziness. We're restless with our unsatisfied desires. What desires has God put in your heart? Then pursue them rather than being eaten alive by them. And a lot of people are just eaten alive by their desires rather than doing anything about it. Because it's hard. And I get it, man. It's easy to choose the path that everybody else is going. It's easy to choose the comfortable path. I'm glad I started a church when I was 28, not when I was 48. It's just harder when you get older. You know, when you're young, what do we got to lose? You know? Now I got a lot to lose. And so it makes me sometimes less inclined to take risk. But I need to keep taking risk. And not just be, if God's put a desire in me, then I need to work hard to do whatever God's put in my heart. But oftentimes we're just restless and we have unsatisfied desires because we just don't want to do the work necessary to fulfill those desires. And number 6, the sixth sign that you might be lazy, according to Proverbs, is if you are wise in your own eyes. You are wise in your own eyes. Proverbs 26:16 says this. A lazy man is wiser in his own eyes than 7 men who can answer sensibly. A college professor wrote this. He goes, even in my engineering class, many of the U.S. students expect to be given A's for inhaling and exhaling. And they look at you like you have 4 heads if you suggest that perhaps coming to class, doing homework, and studying might improve their grade. That's what a college professor wrote. Because what we become is lazy. Like, you mean I have to do work to get an A? You mean I don't get an A because I'm just cute? No, you have to work. Our pride and overexalted self-image has made us lazy. So that's what he's talking about here. He's just the lazy man is just wise in his own eyes. He doesn't care who's telling him that this isn't a good idea. He's decided that this is a good idea. Okay, let's wrap up here. So this is kind of what the Proverbs says you're lazy. Let's close with a couple. If you're lazy, you need to kind of magnify this in your eyes. 1, you will bring harm to yourself. This is why you need to fight laziness, okay? You will bring harm to yourself. Okay, let's read some verses that describe what happens to the person that's lazy. Proverbs 10, verse 4 says, he who has a slack hand becomes poor, but the hand of the diligent makes rich. Okay? Look at Proverbs 15. We read this earlier, Proverbs 15. We didn't read this earlier, but we read a similar one. Proverbs 15:19. The way of the lazy man is like a hedge of thorns, but the way of the upright is a highway. So this is Mark Doss Boulevard. Okay, is it rocky and edgy because I haven't taken care of it? Have I brought shame on my family's name because of my reputation and how I work. Okay, that's what he's saying. That what's you all have a street named after you. What's that street look like? All right. And then Proverbs 19 and verse 15. Laziness casts one into deep sleep, and an idle person will suffer hunger. So basically, if I am lazy, it's going to cost me three things. One, it's going to lead to poverty. Two, it's going to lead to shame. And three, it's going to lead to hunger. Now remember, these are maxims, so don't assign this to every person. Not all people who live in poverty are lazy. Not all people who are hungry are lazy. But it can be true if you are given to laziness. It will lead to you living in poverty, living in shame, and living hungry because you're not doing the work necessary to do it. Poverty does nothing but harms you. And that's what that's what the writer of Proverbs, is trying to get across to us. It just hurts you. Maybe what's even worse is, two, you will bring harm to others. If you're lazy, not only will you bring harm to yourself, but you will bring harm to others. So Proverbs 10:26 says, as vinegar to the teeth and smoke to the eyes, so is the lazy man to those who send him. Okay, now I don't really understand the vinegar to the teeth thing. Okay, maybe you guys do. But I do get the smoke to the eyes. You ever sat around a campfire and then you get kind of smoke in your eyes and it becomes this irritant? So this is kind of the best case scenario with the lazy person. When you have a lazy, like you guys all working or have worked in environments where you work with other people. Who drives you crazy? The lazy guy. Right? They drive you crazy. So it's the lazy guy that everybody's got to cover for, and he's like smoke in your eyes. He's an irritant. It's an irritant. Don't be the smoke in the eye guy. Because if you're lazy, though, you'll do it. Because if there's work to do and you're not carrying your weight, then somebody else has to carry it. And so that's kind of the best case scenario, is that if you're lazy, you just become an irritant to your coworkers and to the people around you. The worst case scenario is found in Proverbs 18 and verse 9. And that says this: he who is slothful in his work is a brother to him who is a great destroyer. Now that's pretty powerful. So what he's saying is that if you're lazy, not only are you just an irritant to everybody, but you become a drain on the whole society. Social scientist Charles Murray identifies what he calls the new lower class. They are pleasant, inoffensive folks who consume more than they produce. They may break no laws and break no windows, but by not contributing, they are destroying. A society can absorb the unproduction of a few people, but when that number reaches into the millions, the consequences are high for everybody. So the point being that if I'm not doing what I can do to make society better, then I'm draining society. I'm pulling people down. And so what happens is Topeka a better city because I'm in it? Or am I lazy and not really carrying my weight to make the city? See, it's easy. The lazy thing to do is sit around and gripe about what I don't like about this place. And how somebody needs to, it's just, that's what lazy people do. They just kind of complain and whine, and they don't break any buildings, and they don't tear up, they don't vandalize, they haven't stolen our gas up there, but they're just kind of a drain on the city because they're not doing anything to help it. It's this thing where kids stay kids even when they become adults. So they're adolescents their entire life because they've never officially grown up. And that's really what he's saying here. when I'm lazy, I'm a brother to him who's a great destroyer. I'm not vandalizing, I'm not stealing the city, but I'm not making the city better. So in a lot of ways, I'm just like them. I'm a brother. We're in the same class. So some strong words to challenge us to stay on top of our laziness, right? Because I don't want to be known as lazy, because most importantly, because I do not believe that Jesus was lazy. Jesus worked hard. I believe that Jesus was a good carpenter. I believe that he was submissive to his Father. He worked hard. He had a reputation for working hard. And I believe he did the work of God well too, because he worked hard at it. When you get on a boat and sleep through a storm, you've worked pretty hard that day. And I think Jesus was a hard worker. So let's fight laziness, because just a little bit of it, what does it say? A little slumber, a little sleep. We make little concessions, they lead to huge problems. So let's fight laziness in our lives, okay? All right, let's go to the Lord in prayer. Thank you, Lord, for showing us grace even when we're lazy. And Lord, I know I'm lazy, maybe the laziest one in the group, and there's a lot of things I need to change. But I know that you love me in spite of my errors, in spite of my mistakes. Thank you for the grace you show me every day, day after day after day. And I thank you for your mercy, and I thank you for your word that is a reminder to me over and over again of how you want me to live, and how you warn me that if I continue to live this way, this is what it leads to. So, Lord, I pray for all of us in this room that we would fight laziness, that we would do the difficult things early, that we would finish tasks that we have started, and that we would bring glory to you by how we live. We pray this all in the wonderful name of Jesus. Amen.